네, 선생님 그러면 시작할까요?
예, 그러도록 하겠습니다. 예.
네. Okay, we will begin now.
예.
네.
안녕하십니까? 예, 오늘 도서출판 갈무리에서 주관하는 우리 리차드 카니 선생님의 재신론 출간을 기념하는 전지구적 화상 강연을 우리가 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 강연의 주제는 신 이후의 신은 있는가라는 주제로 우리 카니 선생님 직접 저 멀리 아일랜드에서 강연을 해주시도록 하겠습니다. 저는 이제 카니 선생님 재신론을 번역한 김동규라고 합니다. 오늘 사회를 맡았고요. 토요일 저녁임에도 불구하고 이렇게 참석해 주신 우리 모든 분들에게 환영과 감사의 말씀 먼저 전합니다. 강연 시작하기 전에 몇 가지 이제 안내를 드리겠습니다. 오늘 또 이제 우리가 온라인으로 만났기 때문에, 그리고 또 이제 언어에 우리가 또 장벽이 있기 때문에 이런 것들을 이제 뛰어넘을 만한 여러 가지 계기들을 우리 마련했습니다. 먼저 오늘 강의는 순차 통역으로 이렇게 진행이 됩니다. 그래서 이렇게 뭐 영어에 부담 없이 많은 분들 이게 참여하실 수 있을 것 같고요. 통역은 우리 갈무리 출판사 김정현 선생님께서 해주시겠습니다. 다만 이제 강연문 통역은 따로 없고 강연문에 그 한국어 번역본이 있습니다. 그걸 이제 화면으로 띄워드릴 겁니다. 그리고 우리 김정현 선생님께서 그 마우스 커서로 그걸 이제 그 선생님이 말씀하실 때마다 그걸 표시를 해주실 거예요. 어느 부분을 지금 얘기하고 있다는 것을. 그렇게 이제 확인하시면 선생님 강연을 들으시면서 원고를 한국어 번역본 원고를 확인해 주시면 될 것 같고요. 나중에 이제 질의응답 시간 당연히 이제 순차 통역으로 진행이 될 예정입니다. 그래서 먼저 이제 6시부터 6시 50분까지 우리 카니 선생님 이제 강연을 하고요. 그 다음에 6시 50분부터 한 10분 정도 쉬고 다시 7시부터 또 8시까지 질의응답과 토론 시간을 가지도록 하겠습니다. 원활한 진행을 위해서 강연자, 사회자, 통역자를 제외하고 나머지 분들은 이제 음소거 상태로 일단은 이제 설정을 하게 됩니다. 좀 양해 부탁드리고요. 자, 그러면 이제 우리가 강연자 소개를 먼저 좀 하겠습니다. 이제 아직 잘 정보가 없는 분들도 계시니까요. 리처드 카니 우리 선생님은 이제 1954년생이시고 아일랜드 코크에서 태어나셨고 현재 이제 미국 보스턴 칼리지에 찰스 리릭 석좌 교수, 기금 석좌 교수. 외국에는 그게 사람 이름 일단 어떤 사람이 기부를 하고 거기에 그 교수직이 있고 그걸 이제 기금 석좌 교수, 우리말로 번역하기 쉽지는 않은데 그렇게 이제 보통 부릅니다. 그 기금 석좌 교수직에 보스턴 칼리지 철학과에 지금 재직 중이시고요. 더블린 대학교 아일랜드에, 그다음에 맥길 대학교, 또 파리 10대학에서 공부를 하셨고, 파리 10대학에서 이제 여러분 잘 아시는 폴 리퀘르의 그 지도 아래 박사 학위를 받으셨습니다. 특별히 2000년대 이후 오늘 특별히 이제 이 본서 재신론 전후로 이제 독창적인 선생님만의 그 철학을 구가하시고 또 그런 종교 철학을 구축하셔서 지금 실제로 현존하는 학계에서는 유럽 대륙 종교 철학이라고 하는 이 분야에서는 가장 탁월한 중요한 철학자 중에 한 사람으로 손꼽히고 있습니다. 그리고 선생님 이제 아일랜드의 이제 굉장히 공공 지식인으로서 북아일랜드 평화협정 초안을 작성하는 데 참여하시기도 했고 또 다양한 분야에서 본인의 철학과 본인의 어떤 삶의 도전을 이제 실천하고 계신 신앙의 도전을 실천하고 계신 분입니다. 특별히 보스턴 칼리지에서는 이제 선생님이 이제 주도한 게스트북 프로젝트라고 하는 게 있는데 종교, 인종, 역사 속에 갈등이 분쟁이 있는 그 지역에서 서로 다른 진영에 속한 사람들이 이야기를 나누고 그 이야기를 공유함으로써 화해와 치유와 환대의 장을 여는 그런 의미 있는 기획을 기획해서 또 하고 계십니다. 이렇게 이론에서만이 아니라 실천의 영역에서 우리 카니슨 여러 중요한 활동을 하고 계신다는 걸 말씀드리고 싶고, 우리나라에 나온 책으로는요 실제로 여러 권의 책이 나왔습니다. 근데 우리나라에서는 선생님 이제 이름이 잘못 표기돼서 리차드 카니가 아니고 커니라고 이제 보통 표기가 많이 되어 있었습니다. 그래서 이방인 신 괴물 이런 책이 나와 있고요. 그 다음에 이제 현대 사상가들의 대화라고 하는 이 책도 지금 나와 있습니다. 그리고 이제 현대 유럽 철학의 흐름이라고 하는 책이 있고요. 오늘 이제 할 책은 우리가 리차드 카니의 재신론이라는 이 책을 가지고 우리가 이 책의 내용을 두고 이제 지금 강연을 하실 겁니다. 그리고 특별히 이제 뭐 우리나라에 출판 안 됐지만 올해 2021년 올해 이제 굉장히 중요한 작업들을 두 편의 작업을 이제 발표를 하셨습니다. 하나가 이제 Radical Hospitality라고 하는 이 책이 있습니다. 그 환대의 문제를만 이제 집중해서 쓴 책이 있고요. 그다음에 이제 터치라고 하는 이 책이 있습니다. 아주 재밌는 책입니다. 이제 만진다는 게 뭐냐 여기에 대해서 아주 심도 있게 분석하시고 특별히 지금 코로나 바이러스 이제 팬데믹 시대에 우리가 사회적 거리두기를 하고 있는데 그 와중에 이제 접촉의 의미가 뭐냐를 아주 잘 현상학적으로 또 해석학적으로 잘 풀어낸 그런 책이 있습니다. 이런 지금도 이렇게 왕성하게 학문 활동을 하고 계신 우리 카니 선생님을 이렇게 모시게 돼서 굉장히 기쁘게 생각하고요. 오늘은 이제 재신론 우리가 방금 얘기했던 여러분 잘 아시는 이제 이번에 출간된 이 책 선생님은 가장 주저라고 할 수 있는 책입니다. 그래서 말하는 신 이후의 신이 무엇인지 그리고 신 이후의 신을 만난 이 독특한 사건이 무엇인지 그리고 유신론과 무신론을 넘어서는 그 제3의 길로서 이 재신론 아나세이즘이라고 하는 게 무엇인지 오늘 알아보는 그런 시간을 가지도록 하겠습니다. 네. 리차드 카니 선생님이 계신 지금 아일랜드는 시차가 있어서 지금 오전 10시입니다. 10시인데 오늘 강연을 위해서 특별히 이렇게 자리에 몸소 나와 주셨습니다. 그러면 이제 오늘 기념 강연 우리 리차드 카니 선생님 모셔보겠습니다. 각자 여러분 계신 자리에서 환영의 인사를 좀 표해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. Please welcome, please welcome Professor Richard Kani.
Thank you, Dongyu Kim. It is a great honor to be here and to have you as my translator. So I am very grateful, and also very grateful to Donggyung Kim, who has organized this as the editor of Kalmuri Press. So I look forward to delivering the paper and then answering your very excellent questions.
네, 저의 책의 번역자이신 김동균 선생님께 감사드리고요. 또 오늘 행사 조직해주신 갈무리 출판사 감사드리고요. 그리고 이제 오늘 이렇게 강연을 열게 돼서 굉장히 기쁘고 저의 강연문을 이제 강연을 하고 나서 이제 여러분들의 훌륭한 질문들에 대해서 응답을 하도록 하겠습니다.
Before I begin, just one note, and that is that when I received your questions, I realized that most of you are obviously conversant with Eastern religion, and my book is very much coming from a history of Western religion, particularly Jewish Christian religion. But I want to say from the outset that what I'm saying about Judaism and Christianity and that particular Western story equally applies, in my view, to Eastern spiritualities.
네, 가장 먼저 한 가지를 지적하고 나서 시작을 하고 싶은데요. 여러분의 질문을 받고 나서 제가 깨달은 점은 대부분 여러분들께서 동양 종교에 인취해 계시다, 관심이 있다라는 점입니다. 그런데 제 책은 서구 종교의 역사, 특히 유대 그리스도교 전통의 역사에서 비롯하는 부분이 많습니다. 그리고 가장 먼저 제가 얘기하고 싶은 부분은 제 책의 내용이 유래하고 있는 유대 그리스도교, 서양 종교에 대해서 제가 하고 있는 말은 동양의 영성적인 내용에 있어서도 적용될 수 있다라는 것입니다.
Very good, thank you. And if by any chance, Kim, I am reading too quickly, please tell me and I will slow down.
오케이. 네. 너무 빨리 읽으시면 말씀을 해달라고 하셨습니다. 네.
All right. So, what comes after God? What follows in the wake of our letting go of God? What emerges out of that night of not knowing, that moment of abandoning and abandonment, especially for those who, after ridding themselves of God, still seek God? That is the question I wish to pursue in this book. And so doing, I propose the possibility of a third way beyond the extremes of dogmatic theism and militant atheism, those polar opposites of certainty that have maimed so many minds and souls in our history. This third option, this wager of faith beyond faith, I called anatheism. from the Greek anatheos, meaning God after God. Anatheism, is another word for another way of seeking and sounding the things we considered sacred, but can never fully fathom or prove. It is another idiom for receiving back what we've given up, as if we were encountering it for the first time. Just as Abraham received back Isaac as a gift, having given him up as a patriarchal project. In short, it is another way of returning to a God beyond or beneath the God we thought we possessed. The wager throughout this book is that it is only if one concedes that one knows virtually nothing about God that one can begin to recover the presence of holiness in the flesh of ordinary existence. Such holiness, I will suggest, was always already there, only we didn't see it or touch it or hear it. This is what Jacob discovered in the Bible after he wrestled with the stranger through the night, realizing at dawn that he had seen the face of God. It is what the disciples of Jesus discovered after they had walked with the stranger down the road to Emmaus, before recognizing retrospectively, after the breaking of bread, that this wanderer was their risen teacher. And it is a lesson recorded by many great mystics who traversed the dark night of the soul before discovering, like Teresa of Avila, that divinity dwells in the pots and pans. Anatheos, the return of God after the disappearance of God, a new and surprising divinity that comes all the way back in an instant to where we were without knowing it. Eternity in the epiphany of each moment, repeating, recalling, returning again and again. Let me say at the outset that the moment of not knowing that initiates the anatheist turn is not just epistemological, nor is it a prerogative of elite intellectuals. The anatheist moment is one available to anyone who experiences instants of deep disorientation, doubt, or dread, when we are no longer sure exactly who we are or where we are going. Such moments may visit us in the middle of the night, in the void of boredom or melancholy, in the pain of loss or depression, or simply in the holy insecurity of radical openness to the strange. Far from being the preserve of hypercognitive cogitos, the event of radical dispossession is felt by any human being who is deeply bewildered by what existence means. Anatheist moments are experienced in our bones, in our moods, our affects, our senses, our emotions, before they are theoretically interrogated by our minds. And they are, I would insist, as familiar to believers as to non-believers. No human can be absolutely sure about absolutes. Fortunately, sages and saints have repeatedly testified to encountering the divine in what they call clouds of unknowing or caves of darkness. Believers typically pray to God to help their disbelief, as in the Bible, Mark 9:24. And even Christ found himself questioning his own Father on the cross. He says, "Why have you forsaken me?" Before he could return to renewed belief in life after his death, when he says, "Into thine hands, into your hands, I commend my spirit." Both of those phrases are said on the cross. No one is exempt from the moment of not knowing. Anatheism presupposes this atheistic moment as antidote to dogmatic theism. True faith, as the Russian novelist Dostoevsky put it, bursts forth from the crucible of doubt. This book, as noted, focuses primarily on the Abrahamic Western tradition, as the traditions of Judaism, Christianity, Islam respond to certain decisive events in Western history, such, for example, as the encounter with Greek metaphysics, the modern European Enlightenment, and in the Second World War, the Holocaust. This does not preclude, of course, the opening of a conversation with certain non-Western Eastern wisdom traditions, a conversation that I hold is imperative for anatheism. For how can one discover the God of hospitality in one's own tradition if one is not open to dialoguing with others in other traditions? The shortest route from self to self is through the other. And this is one reason why, in the final chapter of the book, I look at how Western and Eastern spiritualities meet in the life and mind of various holy, wise people, including Mahatma Gandhi. But this volume does not, I repeat, claim to cover non-Abrahamic religions in any significant or comprehensive fashion. That is work for two other companion volumes, which I have written or edited, namely Interreligious Imagination and Filling the God Void. But let me be clear. When I speak of anatheism, I'm not advocating some new religion. God forbid. Anatheism is not a hypothetical synthesis in a dialectic moving from theism through atheism to a final goal. Anatheism does not subscribe to a master narrative about the maturation of humanity from primitive religion through secular critique to a new spirituality for the third millennium. That is, some postmodern faith composed of the best ingredients of all wisdom traditions. It is not predicated on a periodized progression from antique faith to rational post-belief. There is no theology of fulfillment here. Anatheism is not supersessionism, that is, one religion superseding another. It has no patron saints, and if it did, Hegel or Fukuyama would not be amongst them. They both believed in sort of history as an inevitable progression. Nor would the theosophists who endorsed a New Age spirituality analogous to the Esperanto project for a synthetic language in Europe. Esperanto was this synthetic ideal language that would bring together the best of all the European languages, Spanish, Italian, English, German, etc. But it never came to be. Anatheism eschews, avoids teleology as much as it does archaeology. It resists both perfect origins and perfect ends. So what is anatheism? As the prefix ana suggests, anatheism is about repetition and return, not in the sense of a reversion to an anterior state of perfection, as in Plato's anamnesis, where we remember our pre-existence with timeless forms, nor indeed in the sense of a return to some prelapsarian state of pure belief before modernity dissolved our eternal verities. There is nothing nostalgic at work here. We are, to borrow from Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher, not concerned with a recollection backward, but with a repetition forward. The ana signals a movement of return to what I call a primordial wager, to an inaugural instant of reckoning at the root of belief. It marks a reopening of that space where we are free to choose between faith or non-faith. And as such, atheism is about the option of retrieved belief as an option, choice. It operates before as well as after the division between theism and atheism. And it makes both theism and atheism possible. So it's less a position like theism or atheism than a disposition, an openness. Anatheism, in short, is an invitation to revisit what might be termed a primary scene of religion, the encounter with a radical stranger who we choose or don't choose to call God. What we discover in such encounters with the stranger is, of course, a practice of infinite modulation. Moments of epiphany are always embedded in the condition of culture, in a condition or the condition of culture, and always require representation and reading. The event of the stranger is not the only scene thus recorded, to be sure. Most accounts of Abraham and Abrahamic religion, for example, have emphasized other defining moments of faith, such as creation, salvation, miracle, sovereignty, judgment. But the scene of the stranger is at the core of the anatheist wager that concerns me here. Even if this epiphanic moment of awakening is often neglected in official Western theologies. Anatheism, in other words, is nothing particularly new. It is simply a new name for something very old, and I hasten to add, something constantly recurring in both the history of humanity and of each human life. The anatheist wager has gone by different names throughout the course of human Western culture. We find it in various moments of creative not knowing that mark a break with ingrained habits of thought and open up novel possibilities of meaning. For without the suspension of received assumptions, we cannot be open to the birth of the new. Without the abandonment of accredited certainties, we remain inattentive to the advent of the strange. We ignore those moments of sacred enfleshment when the future erupts through the continuum of time. This attitude of holy insecurity ranges in Western history from the Socratic practice of not knowing as precondition of the search for truth, that we find in Plato, through such decisive inaugurations of philosophical wonderment and questioning in the history of Western philosophy as Augustine's famous question, who do I seek? Cusa, Nicholas of Cusa's Renaissance thinker, notion of the docta ignorantia, coming to truth through not knowing, ignorantia, ignorance. Kierkegaard's famous idea of objective uncertainty, that we don't have certainty about objective matters. We only know subjectively what is true in our experience. And finally, Husserl's epoche, what he called the epoche, which brackets the prejudices of the so-called natural attitude, that is our everyday attitudes and prejudices. Such interrogative gestures throughout the history of Western philosophy testify to the indispensable significance of a moment of dispossession and bewilderment if one is to become attuned to the acoustics of the other. Without not knowing, agnosis, hence agnosticism, there would be no motivating urge to know more, to understand differently, to think otherwise, and therefore no possibility of seeking to recognize, the Greek anagnorisis, to recognize truth as it begins anew, again and again. Sometimes such moments of not knowing were seen as preludes to sacred insights beyond the scope of rational or metaphysical knowledge, as when Immanuel Kant announced that he was, quote, setting the limits to knowledge in order to make way for faith, or when Wittgenstein famously announced, what we cannot talk about, we must pass over in silence. So acknowledging the ineffable space of what he called in German, das Mystische, the mystical. And Martin Heidegger, no doubt, had something similar in mind when he spoke of deconstructing the abstract God of metaphysics, understood as causa sui, or the cause of itself, if we are to recover or rediscover a God before whom we can dance and pray. Not just a God we can know logically, but a God before whom we can actually dance and pray existentially. But it is arguably Socrates, at the very beginning of philosophy, who first indicated the philosophical doctrine of sacred non-knowing when he engaged in dialogue with the stranger and suspended the mythical accounts of the gods in order to commit himself to a second affirmation of divinity, a divine good beyond accredited concepts and conventions. And that's, of course, why Socrates was put to death, because he defied the conventions of his time, the religious conventions of his time. Philosophically speaking, therefore, the anatheist wager is marked by a moment of radicalized innocence, innocens, which means not knowing, that opens the door to ulterior dimensions of truth. Without disorientation, there can be no reorientation. Without deconstruction, no reconstruction. What then of biblical scripture, the other formative source of Western wisdom along with Greek philosophy? In my first chapter, I concentrate on several key anatheist moments in the Abrahamic tradition, namely Abraham's encounter with desert strangers, Mary's answer to the Annunciation, the angel who announces the birth of Jesus, and Muhammad's response to a voice in a cave. These primal dramas of response serve as portals to faith, thresholds to new depths of divine recognition. All are instances of anagnosis, recognition. And the subsequent history of biblical mysticism, whether it be Jewish, Christian, or Islamic, provides recurring testimonies to such liminal events, such threshold events. Some examples. One thinks of the apophatic breakthroughs of theologians like Dionysius the Areopagite and Gregory of Nyssa in the early centuries of the Christian church, or the various professions of mystical unknowing by the likes of John of the Cross, Julian of Norwich, Rusbihan Bakli, and Meister Eckhart, who went so far as to ask God to rid him of God. His famous prayer was, "I pray to God to rid me of God." Almost all the great mystics and sages attested to some moment of agnostic abandonment as a crucial transition to a deeper faith. They called it by such names as Abgeschiedenheit, Gelassenheit, Nada, letting go, abandoning, nothing. Such anatheist suspensions of theistic certainties allowed for a return, Anna, to a second kind of faith, a faith beyond faith in a God beyond God. Michel de Certeau recognizes the importance of mystical experience in the West as a crossover point between the religious and the irreligious, the secular and the sacred. I quote Michel de Certeau, a French philosopher of the 20th century. Mysticism is less a heresy or a liberation from religion than an instrument for the work of unveiling within religion itself, a truth that would first be formulated in the mode of a margin, inexpressible in relation to orthodox texts and institutions, and which would then be able to be exhumed from beliefs. The study of mysticism thus makes a non-religious exegesis of religion possible. It also gives rise, in the historical relation of the West to itself, to a reintegration that eradicates the past without losing its meaning. Excuse me. The philosophical and biblical traditions that inform Western notions of the sacred stranger, are not mutually exclusive. Athens, the origin of Greek philosophy, and Jerusalem, the origin of biblical thinking, are both guests and hosts to one another. They question and amplify the respective notions of the sacred, where Greek aesthetics, for example, emphasizes sacred immanence, the divine within the world. Biblical ethics cherishes holy transcendence, God beyond the world. At times, of course, the relationship is adversarial, but it is not necessarily so. And in the measure that they extend hospitality to each other, welcoming the stranger to their respective homes, they can interanimate in inventive ways. That is Athens and Jerusalem, Greek and the biblical. The Greek house of philosophy, as Derrida notes, offers hospitality to a thought that would remain foreign in welcoming alterity in general into the heart of the Logos. So Greek metaphysics opens to Judeo-Christian theology. And the house of David, that is to say, Judaism and Christianity, has throughout history welcomed Greek Logos into the heart of transcendence. The resulting crossovers have given birth to a double alliance that testifies to an underlying rending of a world attached to both the philosophers and the prophets. We might cite here the decisive work of translation from Hebrew into Greek, the so-called Septuagint, as typical of such mutual hospitality between, again, the Greek and the biblical. Likewise, the introduction of Greek notions of being into readings of Genesis or Exodus in the Bible has allowed for amplifications and revisions of Platonic and Aristotelian categories of form and matter, potency and act. Greek and Jew put each other in question in a shock of strangeness that provokes endless new translations. One calls the other into anatheist openness, or as the Irish novelist James Joyce put it, Jew-Greek is Greek Jew. The copula between Greek and Jew is the gap that separates and unites self and stranger. The is, Jew Greek is Greek Jew, the is wrestles with the is not at its very heart. Because of course the Greek is not the Jew and the Jew is not the Greek. But to say they are is to recognize that tension between the is and the is not, identity and non-identity. And this is why anatheism may be said to operate according to what Paul Ricoeur calls a tensional model of metaphor, a fertile encounter between the familiar and the foreign. Finally, let me add that if we venture into other sacred cultures, we find suggestive analogies to anatheist openness in what, for example, Buddhism calls emptiness, sunyata, in the famous Heart Sutra, or in what the Upanishads in Hinduism refer to as the empty space, akasa, at the very heart of the cave, or in the cave of the heart, as it's called, the guha. In these Eastern or non-Western traditions, as in others, there is a deep appreciation of the importance of withdrawing from creedal attachments, at least provisionally, withdrawing from ideology, in order to liberate oneself into awareness of the holy beyond habitual constructions. But such comparisons and contrasts are, alas, beyond the limits of this book. So, in sum, does anatheism differ from atheism? This is a key question for the deliberations that follow. But let me offer this preliminary conjecture. Anatheism differs from dogmatic atheism in that it resists absolutist positions against the divine, just as it differs from the absolute positions of dogmatic theism for the divine. It is a movement, not a state, that refuses all absolute talk about the absolute, be it negative talk or positive talk, theistic or atheistic, for it acknowledges that the absolute can never be understood absolutely by any single person or religion. Anatheism acknowledges the emancipatory force of critical atheism as an integral part of theism, understood as a second faith beyond faith. And it also respects agnostic atheism that remains just that, agnosis in Greek, that is, not knowing, choosing not to make the second move of faith. Both are perfectly legitimate options. What anatheism opposes is militant anti-theism, which, as in the reign of terror in the French Revolution or Stalinist persecutions in the 20th century, is just as pernicious as triumphal theism. So anatheism is a freedom of belief that precedes the choice between theism and atheism as much as it follows in its wake. The choice of faith is never taken once or for all. It needs to be repeated again and again. Every time we speak in the name of God or ask God why God has abandoned us. Anatheism therefore performs a drama of decision whenever humans encounter the stranger, who, like the poet Wilkes' statue, whispers, "Change your life." And every moment is a portal through which this stranger may enter. Thank you.
Thank you for your lecture. 예, 감사합니다. 예, 잘 들으셨는지요? 혹시 괜찮으시면 짧게 Q&A 타임, 그러니까 이제 어떤 깊이 있는 질문 나중에 하시고 오늘 강연만 듣고 지금 강연 내용에서 좀 이해가 안 되는 부분만 개념의 해명이라든가 이런 걸 위해서 혹시 질문 질의응답 대신 짧게 가지면 어떨까요? Professor Richard, if you allow, we can have a question and answer in
Yes.
Yes, for clarification. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd be very happy. Now, I have received a number of questions already written in written form by Kang Jai Ha and Heo Sung and Kim Young, Yu Chi Suk, Mok Min Young, Yoon Soo Jin, Sun Bumi, Leo Kyung, Hwang In Gap, Lee Un Ok, and Lee Min Hee. So I have all those questions, 12 questions. I don't know whether you want me to take each one or whether you want to take new questions either.
네, 사전 질문들 모두 받으셨는데 그것들을 먼저 대답을 하실지 아니면은 몇 개만 골라서 응답을 해야 될지 모르겠다고 하셨습니다. 그 강연에 대한 질문 받는다고 말씀드릴까요?
네네. 일단은 강연에 대한 질문 이제 방금 들으셨으니까
네.
예, 시간 이제 청중들에게서 먼저 받겠습니다. 잠깐. 예.
We'd like to open questions to the audience right now about what you just talked about your talk. Some questions maybe to clarify some
Okay.
concepts
good.
directly
Okay.
related to your talk.
Okay. And then we can come back to the others if there is time. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Very good.
예, 그러면 자유롭게 질문해 주시죠. 네, 김종미 선생님 맞으신가요? 예.
네.
천천히 좀 말씀해 주세요. 우리 통역을 해야
네.
되니까. 예. 천천히.
예, 지금 그러니까 이게 개념 이제 잘 납득 이해가 완전하게 안 되는 거 먼저 질문할 수 있는 기회를 주셔서 고맙고요, 김종희 선생님. 여기에서 지금 발제문에 보면은 그러니까 지금 제가 발제문 잠깐만요. 아까 우파니샤드와 이제 바라다밀경에 보면은 이제 슈냐타가 나오는데 여기에서 공은 제가 알기로는 불교 철학적으로는 연기론과 같은 걸로 얘기되고 있고 우리가 연기론이라고 했을 때는 불교 철학에서 그러니까 인연의 연을 쓰기 때문에 원인 결과가 계속 이어지는 거라고 생각을 하는데 이것과 흡사하다, 비슷하다라는 식의 풀이가 돼 있어서 제가 이해하고 있는 게 맞는지 여쭙고 싶습니다.
네, 그러면 공개념이 비롯한 연기론과 재신론이 어떻게 연결되는지를 질문드리면 될까요?
예.
She'd like to ask how you believe the Buddhist theory of sunyata is, and the theory of causality, Buddhistic theory of causality, is related to anatheism. What connections do you find between those two?
Well, I have to confess straight off that I know nothing about the Buddhist theory of causality. So you would have to explain that to me, but I'm very happy to talk about the relationship between anatheism and Buddhism generally, as I understand it.
불교 연기론에 대해서 제가 아무것도 모른다는 점을 먼저 고백해야 할 것 같고요. 그래서 설명을 해주시면 좋겠고요. 그렇지만 불교와 재신론의 관계에 대해서는 뭐 설명할 수 있을 것 같습니다.
그러면
So, that all right? Thank you. So what I find is very similar between anatheism and Buddhism is the letting go of absolutes, the letting go of any kind of concept that one becomes attached to and that one seeks to possess as a power and as a certainty and as a thing. So the Buddhist notion of sunyata as the no thing seems to me to be very close to what some of the Western mystics, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, you know, whether it's Rumi, the poet, or John of the Cross, or some of the Jewish mystics, what they all experienced as the nada, the nothing, the letting go. Because the temptation is to take what is the sacred, which is always something, how shall I put it, beyond the ego self, and to reduce it to our particular possession, our particular projection. So I think anatheism and Buddhism are very committed to disillusioning us from that kind of pathological possession and attachment, and opening us to a form of detachment, or what I call disposition.
일단 불교와 제신론에서는 양자 모두 어떤 절대적인 것을 포기하는 것, 그것을 놓는 것, 예, 이런 점에 있어서 유사한 점이 있다고 생각을 했습니다. 그러니까 어떤 개념에 집착을 하거나 애착을 갖게 되면은 그거를 권력으로서 소유하고 어떤 확실성이나 사물로서 우리가 소유물로 갖고 싶어하는 그런 경향이 생기는데요. 그 순야타 또는 nothing, 사물 아닌 것이라는 그 개념 속에서 유대 전통이나 그 신비주의자들이 갖고 있는 그 포기, 놓음의 그것이 있다고 느꼈고, 그리고 항상 우리는 어떤 성스러운 것, 에고 너머의 어떤 것을 우리의 특정한 소유물로 환원하고자 하는 유혹에 빠지곤 합니다. 그런데 제신론은 바로 그 점, 그런 병리학적 환상에서 벗어나는 것에 헌신을 하고, 그럼으로써 어떤 무심함을 지향한다는 점에서 관계가 있다고 생각했습니다.
And if I might just add maybe something else here, if there is time, I would also see a comparison, an analogy between anatheism as a journey and Buddhism as a journey. Just as the Buddha began as Siddhartha, a prince, he had to go on a journey and let go of everything that he possessed in terms of powers in order to open himself to this compassion with all sentient beings. And I think one finds a very similar journey in anatheism. Anatheism is a journey, whether it's Abraham going through the desert, whether it's Jesus going, on the road to the cross and resurrection. There's the life of Jesus as a journey, just as there's the life of Siddhartha as he becomes enlightened. And just as the Buddha doesn't stay around, he dies, in order that everybody can discover their own Buddha nature, and some return as bodhisattvas. So to take one of the anatheist religions in the West, at any rate, and to me, Buddhism is as anatheist as Christianity, but you find in Christ, when he dies, he says he will return as all those strangers who give a cup of water, who give bread to the person who is thirsty and hungry. And that's in a way saying, don't hang on to me as a God that you can possess as an absolute. That is in fact the temptation of the devil. You must let me go so that I may return as everybody who exists in love and compassion. So there I see a very, very important parallel between a certain anatheist reading of Christianity, which I would propose, for instance, and an anatheist reading of Buddhism. That's not to deny that there are differences between Buddhism and Christianity. I think Christianity makes more emphasis on the flesh and incarnation. So, maybe Buddhism has something to learn in dialogue from Christianity about the importance of the flesh and of desire and of the earth. But by the same token, Christianity has so much to learn from Buddhism about detachment and compassion for all sentient beings.
그리고 두 가지가, 그러니까 제신론과 불교 모두 여정이라는 점을 덧붙이고 싶습니다. 그러니까 불교에서도 시다르타가 왕자였지만 그가 가진 모든 것을 포기하고 놓고 모든 존재를 향한 열정으로 향한 여정을 벌였던 것처럼 제신론도 여정입니다. 사막을 여행했던 에이브라함, 또 예수의 삶도 마찬가지고요. 그래서 불교는 그리스도교만큼 제신론적이다, 이렇게 말을 하고 싶습니다. 그리고 그리스도교에서는 예수가 그 빵을 떼어주면서 나에게 집착하지 말아라, 나를 버리고 그래야 내가 모든 이로 되돌아올 수 있다, 이렇게 사랑과 열정으로 되돌아올 수 있다, 이렇게 말을 했는데요. 이런 것이 굉장히 중요한 제신론적 독해라고 생각하고, 그리고 그래서 저는 불교도 제신론적으로 독해할 수 있다, 이렇게 생각하고요. 물론 차이가 없다는 것은 아닙니다. 불교도 그리스도교에서 살과 열정, 또 땅에 갖는 생각에 대해서 배울 수 있을 것이고요. 또 그리스도교도 불교에서 어떤 무심함에 대한 것을 배울 수 있을 것이라고 생각합니다.
예, 그 6쪽에서 7쪽 넘어갈 때
다른 분들도 질문을
죄송합니다. 예.
나중에 또 혹시 시간이 되면 제가 기회 드리도록 하겠습니다. 우리 채팅창에 이 질문 하나만 받고 이제 쉬는 시간을 가지도록 채팅창에 먼저 질문이 와서요. 그 질문 하나만 받고 쉬고 그다음 넘어가도록 하겠습니다. 신이 아니라 신성을 믿는다. 그러니까 일단 보통 우리가 말하는 그리스도교의 신을 말하는 것 같습니다. 그런 신이 아니라 신성을 믿는다. 신의 어떤 인격이나 뭐 신의 성격 이런 걸 믿는다고 제 신론을 이해해도 되겠습니까? 이런 질문이 올라왔습니다.
Could I understand anatheism as believing in divinity, the sacred, and not God, not the divine? Does that make sense? Believing in divinity and not the divine, or believing in the sacred and not God?
Sorry, the statement is Buddhism believes in the sacred but not God. Is that right?
No,
Or
anatheism. Anatheism.
Oh, anatheism.
Yes.
Yes, in some respects you could say that. Buddhism, sorry, anatheism, be it Christian or Buddhist or Hindu or Jewish, whatever. And I think there are even secular forms of anatheism, but we leave that aside. Believes in the sacredness, potential sacredness of all things. Yes. But I would not deny people's understandable need to translate the divine into divinities.
Can you repeat that? Could you repeat that, please?
The last bit, I would
Yes.
not deny the need of people in all, many religions, the need and the desire to translate the divine into divinities, to translate the sacred into gods. And then they make statues and they make icons and pictures and prayers. And you have this, you know, in Hinduism, you have many gods, and in Christianity, you have one, but you have many saints. So I understand the need to have representations of the divine in terms of divinities. But the danger is that the divine gets lost and we latch onto one of these divinities and we exclude everybody else's divinities. And that's where it becomes idolatry.
네, 그렇게 말을 할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그렇지만 그 모든, 그러니까 저는 사람들이 신성한 것을 어떤 신으로 번역을 할 필요를 부인하지는 않습니다. 뭐 이콘이나 그림, 기도 같은 것들을 만들고 그런 제언물들을 가질 필요를 인정을 하지만 그 어떤 거기에 위험이 있다고 생각하는 것입니다. 신성한 것이 신성으로 고착될 때, and the word you used last was idolatry.
Yeah.
idolatry, 어떤 숭배
우상숭배.
우상화, 우상숭배가 될 수 있는 그런 위험이 있다라는 점입니다.
Idolatry is believing in false gods, you know, in ideological gods, that we use nationalistic gods, for instance, that we say we have God and you do not, we are right, you are wrong, therefore we go to war against you because we have God on our side and you have a false God. That's the danger. That's idolatry.
우상숭배라는 건 이데올로기적 신을 말하는데요. 그래서 당신의 신은 거짓이고 우리가 진실한 신이므로 우리만 옳고 이런 식의 생각에 빠지는 것을 말합니다.
No. In other words, I would say that divinities for me, using Buddhist language, are skillful means. They are tools to inspire the imagination and to inspire action, so that we serve the divine. But the danger is we then mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon. And we forget that it is only, but very importantly, a skillful means.
Okay, so it's a tool. 네, 그래서 저는
It's a tool.
예, 신이 도구일 수 있다고 생각합니다. 우리의 행위에 영감을 줄 수 있는 도구가 될 수 있고요. 그렇지만 그 달을 가리키는 손가락이랑 달을 혼돈하면 안 되는 그런 위험이 있다. 이렇게 말씀하신 것 같습니다.
네, 수고하셨습니다.
선생님, 지금 같은 문맥에서 딱 한 가지만 질문할게요. 간단하게요.
네, 간단하게 해주십시오. 예, 시간.
네, 선생님, 그렇다면 그 선생님한테요. 그 십자가에 못 박힌 예수님의 상은 그거는 어떻게 생각하시는지 여쭤봐 주실래요? 그거는 우상숭배가 아닌가요?
네.
그리스도인들이 보통 예수 그리스도를 믿는 그 신앙은 우상 숭배냐
예.
아니냐 이 질문이신가요?
그러니까 선생님이 지금 디비니티랑 디바인을 나눴잖아요. 그러면서 그렇게 그 필요를 인정한다고요. 그러면 선생님이 그 글을 쓴 입장에서 그 십자가에 못 박힌 예수님 상에 대해서는 필요하다고 생각하시는지요?
네.
그냥 직역해 주시면 될 것 같은데요.
Is how about the Jesus crucified on the cross? Is that
Mhm.
also idolatry? Is that the word you used?
It should be the opposite of idolatry, because what Jesus is saying is, you want to make me into an absolute God, but I am not an absolute God that you can possess. I am a sacred person, a divine person who dies, right? Whereas the gods were said to be immortal. Christ dies in order to show people that he's not an idol, that he cannot be treated as an idol. So he says, I must go, I must leave you, I must die on the cross so that the Spirit may return. And the Spirit is the Christian equivalent to what Buddhists would call the bodhisattva, that keeps coming back again and again to help people, to offer compassion and love to people. So the cross, strictly speaking, is the opposite of idolatry, the opposite of attachment, because God is disappearing. I mean, Christ is disappearing so that the Spirit can come back again and again and again. Now, it is true that certain forms of the Christian church in history have turned the crucifixion, the crucified Christ, into an idol. That is true, but that is a huge irony, that the very attempt to disappear is taken as the image of a new ideology for certain movements within the church who sought, to conquer other peoples, or to even say to people, it is good that you suffer. You're born into this life in order to suffer and die, and therefore don't try to have justice or peace or goodness or well-being or happiness. You should be like Christ and accept death, accept pain, accept suffering. And in that way, it is true that the crucifixion, the crucified Christ, has been also misused as an idol.
사실 십자가에 못 박힌 예수는 우상 숭배에 반대하는 것이어야겠지만, 왜냐하면 예수가 이렇게 말을 했기 때문입니다. 여러분이 나를 절대신으로 만들고 싶겠지만 나는 여러분이 소유할 수 있는 어떤 것이 아니라 나는 사망한 신성한 사람이다. 이렇게 말을 했기 때문입니다. 그리고 신은 불멸하는 것이지만 그리스도는 죽습니다. 그리고 그는 자신이 우상이 아니라는 거, 우상으로 취급받지 않기를 원했습니다. 왜냐하면 그 사망함으로써 계속해서 영성이 몇 번이고 돌아올 수 있도록 하는 것이 그의 목적이었습니다. 그래서 불교에서 바디샤크바라는 말을 쓰셨는데, 어떻게 한국어로 해야 할지 모르겠지만요. 마치 불교에서 사람들에게 열정과 사랑을 주기 위해서, 돕기 위해서 그런 개념이 있는 것처럼 그리스도는 자신이 사라짐으로써 어떤 집착이 사라지고 그것에 반대했습니다. 그렇게 해서 영성이 계속해서 돌아올 수 있도록 하기를 원했습니다. 그렇지만 어떤 특정한 그리스도교 교회들에서는 그 십자가에 못 박힌 예수를 우상으로 만들었다는 것은 사실이고, 이 점은 아이러니라고 생각합니다. 그 소멸하려는 시도가 결과적으로 우상이 되었다는 것 자체가, 그래서 어떤 사람들을 지배하고 정복하고 또는 고통을 받는 것이 오히려 행복한 것보다 좋다고, 예수처럼 죽음을, 고통을 받아들여야 한다고 이렇게 말을 하는데, 그 십자가에 못 박힌 예수가 사용되고 있다는 점, 이런 것은 잘못됐다고 생각합니다.
네. 예. 자, 아까 스피릿 얘기하신 거는 예수님이 돌아가시고 내가 너에게 성령을 보내신다 할 때 그 영을 보내신다는 그 의미가 있습니다. 그리고 어떤 분 지적해 주셨는데, 보디샤트바는 이제 보살을 의미한다 이렇게 말씀을 해주셨습니다. 예, 이렇게 도움 주셔서 감사하고요. 자, 우리 10분 정도 쉬었다가 우리가 이제 다시 모여서 또 여러분 질문을 받고 또 카니쌤 답변을 듣겠습니다. Thank you for your answer. we need break time. After 10 minutes, we will continue.
Okay.
Thank you.